Yeah.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see everyone. Welcome to 440 Gallery Artists Talk. Today we're talking about Juliet Martin's I See You Falling Out of Love with Me, a solo show. And we're also going to look at the show in the project space Above and Beyond. And this is with uh, Gail Flanery, Joy Makon, and Robin Roi. So we're first going to take a look at the installation, um, some shots of the reception, and I think Juliet might want to just give us a little commentary as these beautiful shots go by.
So I was actually going to talk about probably the most impactful experience I had with the whole show was during the opening. It was very well attended, and a young woman in her early 20s, I'm guessing, came up to me saying that her boyfriend of 3 years had broken up with her 3 days before her birthday, and her heart was just broken. And by seeing these, she felt that someone understood how she felt.
Mm.
And that it made her feel like there was a way to get through this and there is a way to move on. And I was so touched. And I told her that she could make work, she could write about it, she could just absorb. And that was such an impact on her that it really made me feel good about the work.
Absolutely. What a wonderful comment.
These window installations, since there was a window that I could play with, I thought it would be nice to make something a little silly, a little jokey, but at the same time connecting with these, falling figures and skulls and heads and bones. And the fur was sort of a mistake. A friend of mine was like, you can't just have it be white. You've got to do something with it. And I looked through all of my old fabrics, and the fur was by far the weirdest and definitely the best one for the job.
And it might be a good time to mention that those little skulls are available individually.
You can get 5 for a certain price, and I'm spacing on the price, but
Well, and this is my time to mention that please, if you are in the area and have the chance, visit this in person. It's really wonderful to see these images and really great to hear the artists talk. And there's no comparison to actually getting up close and personal with these.
So this guy's looking at it, the people looking in. He's like, why are these people waiting outside? So here's me, and that shirt was originally a piece that didn't work out. So I sewed it on a t-shirt and then threw a bunch of fringes in that direction.
Bravo.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So it was very nice to see people interacting with the work. Either friends of mine who had seen previous collections, but nothing quite like this, or people, my second cousin showed up, and I barely know her, but she wanted to see what I did. And that was a great situation, just to see different people with different relationships to me and how they saw the work.
I want to say one other thing before we get into the questions for Juliet. I'm going to ask questions of all the artists, and if questions occur to you, please either put them in the chat or jot them down or just remember them. And after I'm done asking my questions and they're done answering, then we open the floor to go through the questions in the chat and letting you unmute then. So in the meantime, please mute if you're not already muted so we don't get any interference. So whoever is speaking, artists, you can unmute for that.
Okay. I'm gonna stop share. Let's see. Stop the share.
What's going on, Susan? You want to, oh, are you
Um,
frozen?
No, sorry. Stop. I just needed to stop the share for a moment.
Okay.
Just technical difficulty there for a moment. But one moment and we'll get right back to it. I just wanted to actually mute myself.
Now you're muted. So when the images come back, we'll be looking at the individual pieces in the show. And I don't know if you could tell from the abundance of work that you can see in the gallery around the visitors. There's quite a few pieces in the show. So I'm going to ask the questions while we're still looking at the pieces. And if we need to go back to a certain image, Juliet, you'll just let Susan know. So, Juliet, congratulations on a really wonderful show. It inspires so many interesting questions, but let's start with the title, I See You Falling Out of Love with Me, which pulls us into a very personal narrative. I'd love to know more about what's behind this statement. And also, do you feel like you're exposing yourself or being vulnerable with this kind of title and this kind of subject matter?
This collection sort of came about by mistake. I started off doing a collection focusing on the idea of falling in love. It was romantic and it was sensitive and it was cuddling and loving. And the more I worked on it, the more sinister and obsessive and devastating it became. So much so that a friend of mine said, where did these awful feelings come from? And I was so proud of myself. I was like, I am such a good artist. I can make emotions come out of nothing. That's how good I am. And then I was embarrassed. I didn't want to say that to her. So I said, oh, it's about my first marriage. And the year before we got divorced, as I watched my ex-husband falling out of love with me. And as it came out of my mouth, I realized, oh my God, it was about that year. It was about seeing him falling out of love with me. So my vulnerability was there, even though I didn't know it was there. And then all of a sudden it all came forward and it became something that I could work through. And it's good for me because it allows me to speak in a way that inspires empathy and intimacy.
Yes, as we've seen from the comments that you got at the opening. So Juliet, I love how I've heard you say that your work isn't always real, but it's always true. Can you talk about your relationship to narrative and truth?
Yes, I think the best way to explain that statement is to look back at a previous collection that happened at the beginning of the COVID crisis. When my husband would take out the trash or get delivery or just leave the apartment, I would freak out. I would think, oh my God, he's going to get COVID and he's going to die and he's never going to come back and I'm going to be alone. And at the same time, I noticed that I was drawing furniture and cups and fruit bowls, which was weird because I really didn't draw still lifes before then. And then I realized I could lose my husband to COVID. I could lose my family. But the only thing I can count on that is not going to go away from me is my furniture. And so hence the title, Household Items Remind Me of You. Now this worked well in terms of projecting a certain emotion, a certain feeling. But when a curator accepted one of my pieces, she said to me, I am so sorry for your loss. And I was like, oh shit. All right. I had to tell her it's about loss, not loss itself. So the real, no, my husband didn't die, but the feeling of as if he had was very true.
Well said. Thank you. Another wonderful aspect of this work is how it's simultaneously expressing that sadness that you're talking about. And at the same time, it's also really funny. Can you speak to this dichotomy?
Well, a lot of the work I do has very serious topics. I try to take on things that are very challenging and sort of will take the viewer maybe in a place they aren't ready to go. And so to do that, I try to incorporate a little humor in the beginning, almost as a doorway. For example, I did a collection about living with mental illness, and that was called You Don't Look Crazy. I did a collection about objectifying women, and that was called My Eyes Are Down Here. Even with the COVID piece, household items remind me of you. So these jokes, these little bits of satire, allow the viewer to sort of come in comfortably before they see a more serious topic. Things can be absurd, and in that way, people can sort of access it a little more if it's a little bit friendly. Basically, the entrance is the joke, but the punchline is always the sadness.
And I find that really beautiful and very true that when I see your work, I'm very engaged and I'm amused. And then as I spend more time with it, I'm getting that second wave of the feeling and the emotions that are behind it. So I would like to ask you now about your materials and your processes. I see weaving, I see painting, spinning, dyeing, drawing, sewing. Can you talk about what special qualities you bring to these traditional materials?
The kind of weaving I do is called seori. It was created in Japan about 50 years ago by a woman named Misao Jo. She wanted to create a loom and a process that was less mechanistic. In her mind, she felt if you could make something look like a machine did it, you should just let the machine do it. She wanted to embrace the mistakes and make them part of the process. For example, if there's a dangling thread or a mismatched color, it's not an error, it's not a flaw. It adds to the essence of the piece and gives it its personality and a little more creativity and free flowing energy. So that's the sort of weaving that I do, and my relation to it is very sincere. I find it meditative and at the same time emotional and exciting. I also spin and dye my own yarn. And for me, that is sort of like my reset. For most of the year, I work on my tapestries, I work on my drawing, I'm putting together pieces. But then over the summer, I like to take some time to just dye and spin yarn. You can buy blue yarn, but I can make the blue yarn I want and put yellow speckles in it. And oftentimes I won't even plan the yarn and I end up with something beautiful. And the spinning is so meditative. You don't have to think that much, and your feet sort of do the walking, and you end up creating a textural experience both for the viewer and for me.
That's wonderful. You make spinning sound so inviting. Um, and also, I love what you're saying about the Sayori weaving because I never get the feeling that even though there's so much weaving and patterns that everything feels unique and like the artist's hand is there.
Oh,
So
thank you. That's one of the main tenets of Sayori weaving, is that you should show through your work, that your personality should come through. It's a way of expressing who you are.
well done. And so my next question is, what brought you to include images and painting on top of your weaving? And is this something we can expect to see from you moving forward?
I really like to draw. I draw every day. I really like to paint. So that's it. No, when I first started weaving and I was making tapestries, the ideas and themes surrounding different collections were not as well defined as they are now. When I started moving forward, the weaving itself is very emotional for me. But in order to convey these very specific topics, I needed sort of like a subtitle. So the illustrations and the painting became like the cliff notes to what was going on in the weaving. And I find using drawing, it helps me get through my ideas in a way that I wouldn't just be able to do with just the weaving.
Bravo. And do you have any thoughts on what's to come next?
Well, I'm working on a new collection, which I'm sure I will reject when I realize it's about something else. But I'll say that my husband titled it Hell's Angels. So that's what's on the board right now. And that was this morning. I've been drawing angels, and he's like, "You should make it Hell's Angels."
That sounds very intriguing.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Juliet.
Thank you.
So now we're ready for Above and Beyond, the show in the project space, and we're going to begin looking at the whole installation, and then we're going to talk to Gail Flanery. So it's a wonderfully nature-themed show in the project space right now. There's Gail Flanery herself. Gail, congratulations on a beautiful show. Can
Thank
you
you.
please tell us about the work that appears here, and are they new pieces?
These pieces were all created recently, and by recently I mean in the last year or so, and mostly the last year. And it's all work on paper. I do mixed media. I tend to be a printmaker, but I also draw and use pastel. And these, it was wonderful to collaborate in the back room once again with my other two colleagues, and our focus just worked with nature, with leaves, and with sky, with trees and leaves and sky. It was we all kind of looked at each other and said, "Oh my gosh, look what we've done here," once again. So it's wonderful to be showing with my two colleagues.
Yes, and I noticed too that it looks like you've used several different approaches. Can you talk about the process here a little bit?
Yes, with this piece that we're looking at right now, basically there was a long, narrow plate that I inked up with black ink. I made the whole thing solid with black ink. And then I took a palette knife and my fingernails actually, and I began to scrape and draw the linear image of the tree by removing the ink, just scraping away. And so the actual lines are the paper underneath where I had removed it. And I had so much fun doing that. It was such a interesting kind of, what will this look like at the end? And it was very satisfying. So it was an interesting way. I am often exploring with once I'm in the print shop, I really do explore and try to manipulate a lot of the print process. I'm never bored.
And Susan, could you move to, yeah, and so what about this piece?
And this piece is what is a process called oil viscosity. And basically the various inks in the palette that you're using, I put more or less oil in them. So some of them are quite drippy, some of them are stiffer. And as a consequence, you are able to achieve a texture and as you can see, almost some pieces show right through. They're translucent almost, the various leaves coming through. And it's really, again, it's a wonderful, the more you use the process, the more you become skilled with it. But initially, it's a lot of sort of, let's see what I get. And oil viscosity is a very old technique. It's really, yeah.
Well, you used it beautifully here.
Oh,
And then,
thanks.
Susan, can we see? Yeah, so this one I have another question about. So I'm curious, that there's seems to be a piece within a piece.
Oh,
And it
yes.
feels like you're making a playful reference to how scale can be interpreted in many ways. Can you talk about your perspective on this?
Well, yeah, and um, I tend to be drawn towards simplicity when it comes to form, and I do often try to use form within form. The most complex things when I'm printing really is my palette. I spend a lot of time mixing my colors, and then I make these big forms. And I was basically exploring and kind of the relationship of color and form in these. And then I wanted to do an old process called, it's a very ancient process called chine collé, where you, although you're printing and you're running it through the press, you collage. So I had a small piece that I had done with the tree with branch linear, and I decided to chine collé it onto the main big piece. So it's, again, it's balancing and exploring the relationship of color and form, and I always do seem to still seek a certain abstract spatial structure. So, and like I said, my first step is always color. It's always coming up with a particular palette that I'm going to use. So, yeah.
Really lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we're going to move to Joy Makon. And Joy, I'd like to congratulate you also on a lovely show. I'm drawn to your self-portrait. It has all the amazing attention to color and detail that we've come to love in your work, and has the bonus of a reference to your personal life. Can you talk about how this piece came about?
Thanks, Karen. It's kind of been a rough few years for everybody, and I think this piece in a lot of ways sums up some things. Where a few months ago I was really just wondering what I wanted to paint. I was having trouble coming up with subject matter because I'm just not getting out and around as I had been years ago. So it kind of limits places that I go to see. But I was seeing this view. This is my front door of my house, and this is what I was seeing out the front door. And I kept looking at it and seeing this beautiful autumn collection, the gradation from my neighbor's trees across the street. This is actually a reflection in the big mirror that is in my entry hall. So I started taking photographs of it. And of course, I was in the photograph because this is a reflection in a mirror that we're looking at. And it just all kind of fell into place for me. It was very challenging to paint, which I kind of loved. It gave me some new things to think about. And I could also deal with the nature and the light and the seasons that I love to put in my work. And that is how this kind of came about. It was also kind of a chance for me just to get some feelings out about where I live and how much I love my old house. And some days it was just really difficult to just walk out the front door and go outside. It was like that, you know, and so I think it all came together in this piece for me.
Absolutely. And that's really apparent, the beloved nature of your house in this intimate portrait here. Thank you, Joy. So now let's move to that unique installation that you did, an abundance of unique views of the sky in square format, where each stands on its own. Can you talk about this special grouping?
Sure. These are really small skies, and they are. I discovered that Arches makes this almost 8-inch block of watercolor paper, which was perfect for this. These really came about, again, where some days I was so busy doing other things that I didn't have time to paint. Or I was working on a very complicated piece where it might often take me a couple weeks just to draw it. And I wasn't getting to paint, and I was missing that. And these little skies they took maybe 15, 20 minutes each, and I was able to work very loose and very wet and use big brushes and make a little bit of a mess and have limited color choices. And they were all from looking out of windows, or in some cases, I would actually go outside and paint the sky that I saw. And they were just great. So I ended up with a big pile of these. I have about 30 of them. There's 21 right here. And I wanted to display them very casually. And I experimented with various ways of hanging them. I had string, I had 2 sizes of paper clips, and I ended up on this series of having them come together with paper clips and little clamps. And I think they kind of just emphasize the ephemeral quality of the sky, what it represents to me, and also just the nature of them. So people can come to the gallery and you can actually buy one and take it home on the spot if you wanted one. We have more to put up, we'll replace them, but they're just really kind of meant to be little pieces of candy almost. That's how I look at them. Yeah.
And I think you said you're offering frames too, if someone wants to.
I do have frames if people want them, yeah. Mhm.
Nice. Also, thank you, Joy. Can we hear about what's next for you? Are these pieces a portent of what's to come?
I think I'm done with these, actually. You know, there'll be something else. I don't know what. This is the first time I've ever kind of done a collection like this, but I think I think I got it out of my system. I'm currently working on a really big sky. So these are 8 inches, and the sky I'm working on now is over 20 inches, and it has a big flower in it. So I'm looking forward to spring. Since we didn't get any good snow this winter, I don't have any new snow scenes to paint, but I'm looking forward to the warm weather and just, you know, brightness and happy and making it happen.
Fantastic, thank you. So thank you, Joy. And now let's move to Robin Roi. So Robin, congratulations on such a strong show. Let's start with your color studies. Can you please tell about your unique process and your intention with these?
Sure. These started off as a line drawing, sitting on the porch, a scene in Maine where we go every summer. I'm just looking out at the dock, and I really fell in love with the line drawing, and I wanted to use it in another way, and I'd been playing around with silhouettes for a very long time. They've kind of come and gone in my work, and I envisioned them as color studies, using really strong color opposites. And I originally had in mind to do maybe 6 or 8 of them, but by the time I finished the 4 of these, I was kind of done. Maybe I'll go back at another time. But what's been kind of interesting to me is that everyone asks me if they are prints. Is it a woodcut? Is it a silk screen? And they're not. They're just acrylic paintings on paper. And they're 4 exactly the same drawing. And I use Surreal paper, which is a way of transferring an image onto another piece of paper. So I actually traced all 4 from my original drawing and then painted them in acrylics.
That's amazing. Also, I wanted you to talk a little bit about the positive and negative aspect and that beautiful edge that you create in the that we can see better in the close-ups. But
yeah, go to the close-up. The first color I put down is the is actually the edge color. If you go to a blue and orange one, I think maybe easier to see. I am painting the scene in a deep blue, which you can see on all the edges. And then on top of that, I paint a light blue and I leave that darker blue edge. And then I fill in the background color, the orange background color. And it gives a kind of trompe-l'oeil effect. So the other thing people keep asking me, or they seem to see that it looks like a cutout, like those Chinese cutouts that that you can find. And it's not, of course, it's just flat paint, but that edge gives it a little bit of trompe-l'oeil.
Yes, it's really beautiful. And the and you think of them in pairs, the positive and negative?
Yes, I mean, they're definitely meant to be in pairs, and they're actually being sold in pairs. I think, even though I think each of them stands up on its own visually, there's a conceptual aspect to it that is missing if you only see one of them.
Yeah, so you could see that here in this.
Yeah, because actually in the photograph, it looks like brown and green, but in truth, in reality, it's a deep purple and green. And, if you just see one of those, again, it stands up on its own, but something happens in giving the opposite effect that, you begin to see the colors very differently.
And they complement one another.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you. So I love the cascading feeling of the accordion book you're showing here. And I can think of it as the single pieces if you were paging through the collection of pages. And I can also just feel the beauty of the whole and the grouping. Can you talk about your practice of making accordion books?
Yes, they are, Moleskine makes this, what they call a Japanese album. So I order these albums, and I have about 6 of them so far. And I've been working on them almost as a relief from my larger pieces, kind of a timeout where I can relax a little bit. I have an idea and I just go with that idea, and I don't have to kind of reinvent or invent the wheel every day. And I had been, I don't know, just fascinated with those naked branches of winter against sometimes these really incredible skies. And so that's the imagery. And the issue I am constantly in front of me is how to display them. And I've often just had them cascading down the whole wall because they're around I'm not sure exactly, they're around 5.5 feet long. And I've also shown them horizontally. So they zigzags, they stand up on their own. And so I'm thinking of how to maybe create some plexiglass boxes that they could sit in. So we'll see. It's still a work in progress as to how to display them. And if anybody has any great ideas, I'm very open to that.
So yeah, put it in the chat, people. So Robin, I love hearing about your process and seeing all the qualities you bring to and the detail that you bring to your work. I'd love for our viewers tonight to hear about what's next for you or what you're working on now.
Well, I'm kind of preparing for my solo show, which won't be till next year, but it takes a few years to put it all together. And I've been thinking about the Adam and Eve story, and mainly how it's come down to how it exists in language, how we we have passed on these myths and stories, biblical and otherwise, in language. They don't exist except in language. So, there's some complex ideas. I don't really have it all put together, and I may not, but that's the theme. And I'm using a lot of my collection of wallpaper collages in this particular collection. So
Very
that's,
exciting.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. Thank you. So thanks, everyone. Beautiful work. And now we can look into the chat and see if there's some more questions. So we have thanks for this. We have amazing work, Juliet. And Ellen Chu says, Juliet, I'm so impressed by your clarity about your work. It's a pleasure to listen to you talk. Very true. And Barton Litchmore says, I love the depth in these pieces. Very cool. And May Southern says, hi, Juliet. I've been planning to visit the show today, and I happened to arrive at the studio around the same time as this talk started. It was lovely to see your work and hear your voice talking about it at the same time, like my own personal tour. Oh, how wonderful. What a great idea. Then there's, I really like the colors here. They're wonderful. I love the looseness of the tiny skies. And looks like none of these are actual questions. We're on to Joy as well. Such interesting work, Joy. I love your door and skies. So let's open it up. If you have a question for any of the artists or comment or a compliment, always accepted, go ahead and unmute, or if you feel more comfortable, you could raise your hand. Janet, you need to unmute.
For Juliet, great show, congratulations. I love the weaving. I'm curious about the skull. What kind of skull is it?
I love cow skulls. I've used cow skulls in the past 5 collections I've made. They show up over and over and over again.
I thought it was a bird.
Oh, they're more than just cows.
Okay.
The cow is the base. And from there, we look at things like birds and cats and rats and snakes. Basically, I like the skulls. One, I think they turn anything into something uncomfortable. Like if you put a figure that looks fine and you put a skull on top of it, it's uncomfortable. And that's a great place to start. But also, skulls don't have expressions. So when someone is looking into a piece, they may have more of their interpretation of what the feeling may be as compared to seeing sadness in someone's eyes.
Fascinating. Wow, that's interesting. I love skulls too. I think
I
they're
love them.
beautiful.
I think they're great.
I had observed earlier that for all of the artists in this show, we all talked about how our art, we need to sometimes take a break from what we're doing, and we come up with different techniques, or we get into a different aspect. For me, painting the little skies. And I think, Juliet, you had mentioned something like, you can spend a month spinning as kind of like a refresher or a way to regroup on things. And we all talked about that a little bit. So Karen, maybe you just want to, I don't know, go.
Yeah, and Robin talked about how her accordion books do that for her, give her a little palette cleanse.
And Gail goes to the park every day and kind of just opens her eyes and sees what's out there.
We talked about that earlier. Yeah, that
Yeah, nature feeds me my work. Yeah, definitely.
it informs the work for sure.
It seems like we all kind of get tightly wound up into what we're currently doing, and we need to find other outlets to keep doing that, but also refresh ourselves. And I thought that was very interesting in regards to that. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that in. Catherine, I see you have a hand.
Yeah, I actually it's been great seeing all this work, and I love the whole show seemed to really, the front and the back coalesced into a really interesting experience. Seeing all the work is great. But I do have a specific question for Robin. It's just I had a response to your work that it seemed like time was there was something about the passage of time that seemed that impressed me, like looking at the two paired pieces in reversed color. It suggested to me, because it's the same scene, it suggested to me the passage of time, seeing this one scene under different light. And also your accordion books, because they unfold over this long expanse, it suggests moving through a place in time. So I was just wondering if you had thought about that as an aspect to what you're doing.
Well, the title of the colored pieces is Dawn to Dusk.
Yes. Yeah.
Definitely.
Right. You do think of right.
Yeah,
Right.
one for me is dawn and one is dusk.
Yeah. Yeah.
It definitely is about the day.
Yeah.
Um,
And the books too seem to unfold over the accordion,
right.
like a passage through a place in time.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I thought about the time aspect in that. To me, it's, it's a forest, and it does, I mean, I think I don't know whether it's dawn or dusk. It could be either one, right?
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
that pink sky could be pink sky in the morning, or it could be, a sunset.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting to whichever one you see,
Yeah. But because they're going to be in pairs, it does suggest that,
Yes.
that
And that is also
transition.
part of why I want them to stay a pair, because it is the whole day, the dawn to dusk.
Mhm. Mhm. Thanks.
Thank you for bringing that out.
I see a hand. Barton, would you like to ask a question? Maybe Barton was frozen? And you'll need to unmute, Barton.
Sorry, I was having trouble with my connection. I don't know what's going on.
There we
This
go.
was very striking. I want to thank everybody for showing it. It's very inspiring to me. I want to ask Juliet, is your work, do you consider it a snapshot of your thoughts? When do you know a piece is done? And it seems such a fluid process. Like, how do you know a piece is done? You're on mute.
You're on mute, Juliet, but that's a great question.
So it's interesting. It's the beginning of the process. I'll be trying out all sorts of different ideas. Like I was saying, falling in love, and then realize we're not falling in love, we're falling out of love. And so then I call that time period weaving purgatory, because it is so painful, because I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm sort of swimming around trying to find my next idea for a show. And then it goes into process. All right, I've got the goal, I've got the components, I'm going to make these pieces, and they slowly get worse and worse. And eventually they're just bad. And that's sort of when I know that it's out. And I'll be working on a piece and I can feel it coming, but I'll be working on a piece and I'll be like, oh, this is it. Oh, there's no more. We're done. We're done. So it's almost not a choice. It's just, I've run out. My gas tank is shot. So
That's really cool.
I have something that we didn't actually get to, Juliet. but that someone mentioned earlier that the dolls that you make remind me of voodoo dolls. So what do you have to say about that?
I have made voodoo dolls in the past, hence the I see you falling out of love with me. That, there we go. We need those dolls to fulfill that project. But
Get that, yes.
right, there we go. No, I almost think of them as like taking a very upsetting moment and taking this sort of like skull-like stuffed animal and making it just sort of ridiculous. And, it's a part of the show that is very playful. There's not a lot, that part, it's not, doesn't have the same sort of punctuation in terms of like falling out, watching someone fall out of love. But I like the pieces because they do have these sort of like skull-like heads. They're sort of ragged. So they're sort of like a playful entrance.
And they have kind of blatant, unabashed emotion also.
Right. Yeah. They're like, I feel bad. And like when I made those heads, and oh my God, I had a basket of eyes, all different eyes to choose from. And I had a basket of mouths and all different mouths to choose from. And I decided I was going to make 50 of them. So I had to set a schedule on how many to make a day.
Wow.
That's
It's
fun.
actually, I do the same thing with the tapestries. I have a folder, and in the one side of the folder, I have drawings of skulls of different animals. And on the other side of the folder, I have all these falling figures. And so when I start a piece, I'm like, oh, this one really needs a bird skull. And this is the figure that's going to make it work.
So a slice of life for being an artist.
I had a question for Joy. That piece is amazing. I was just wondering, what part of the pandemic were you like capturing, and how did it make you feel when you made that piece?
The self-portrait,
Yes.
it's fairly recent. I did it this fall. So I think I painted it in November and December. I'm happy to say I'm emerging from all this, but I think, the past few years have been kind of rough, not just the pandemic. I've had some health issues, which have cleared up, we're moving on. And I'm really thankful to have my art throughout this entire period, because I think without it, I don't know what I would have done. My art and my art colleagues. So most of my pieces, I probably don't interject that much of myself personally. I do landscapes, I do seascapes and still life. So this became more personal in that way. I haven't done a self-portrait in like, I don't know, 20 or 30 years or so. And it's interesting, in my studio, I actually have them here, but it just seemed right at the time. And it just seemed a way to combine the beautiful nature I was seeing and craving with some other things going on. And I think it's hard to do that sometimes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you.
I have a question for Juliet. I noticed the bringing a lot more painting into your pieces, and I really thought it brought a really a new, different kind of depth to it. And I just want to know if you could talk a little bit about how you got there and the process of bringing that in, and your thoughts there.
It's been slowly creeping in over the past few collections. When I first started using the paint, I was just using it to outline objects. It was almost just sort of the only solution I could find, because I couldn't get the edge that I wanted around the drawn figures. The more I used the paint, the more I wanted to use it. The more I used it, the more I wanted to use it. And it became a little dicey, because with the weaving, if I didn't like something, I could cut it up and sew it back together. But once you have that woven fabric, if you mess up, that's the way it goes. You can't paint over it and make it go away, because the background is made out of yarn and is woven. but I do like that moment of, oh my God, like, this is so precious, I have to destroy it. So I feel like the painting really keeps me on edge, and I sort of have to push when I think everything is good is when I know I need to take it further.
Great answer that was. Do we have other questions, comments, ideas for Robin's boxes, anyone?
Robin, I'll take it. I'll get it off your hands.
Well, if there are no further questions, I would like to mention our next show coming up at 4:40. It's Joanne Acey, and her show is called Dreaming, Awake and Asleep. And the show runs from March 16th to April 16th. And please come to the reception on Saturday, March 18th from 4 to 6 p.m. And also in that time, we will have another show, project space called Processing with Susan Greenstein, Kay Sarantonio, and Janet Peterson. Not to be missed. And Susan, maybe you want to unmute, or Janet. They have a workshop happening next Saturday and Sunday and the following Saturday. Do you want to say a few words, Susan?
Sure, sure. So Janet and I have teamed up again, and we are doing a watercolor and acrylic workshop. And we're focusing on interiors this time. We still have a few spots open. So if anybody's interested, Janet, do you by any chance have the link close by that we could put in the chat?
I'll go find it right now.
Excellent. Okay, great.
And this is on Zoom?
It's on Zoom,
On
and it
Zoom.
will be this upcoming Saturday and Sunday from 10 to 12:30, and then the following Saturday, the same time.
Wonderful.
And I'll put it in the chat right now.
Great, great.
Janet.
Thank you.
And next Sunday, March 5th at 4:40, at 440 Gallery at 4:40 p.m., there's going to be a poetry reading with Cindy Savitt, Celia Bland, and Jonathan Blunk. And if you want to learn more about that, you can check our website. There's a little blurb about it. And other than that, I hope to stop by and see the beautiful show that's up right now. And I hope you all enjoy what's left of your weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Congratulations, everybody. Thank you.
Okay.